Today's lesson we're going to talk about operations with integers. What is an integer? An integer is a whole number that is either positive or negative, including 0. Okay, so we can have -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and this will continue for all positive whole numbers as well as all negative whole numbers. These are integers. Zero pairs are something that you guys should be familiar with. If you have a positive and the same amount of negatives, a positive and a negative together forms a zero pair, so that this value is equal to 0. It would work the same way if I had 2 positives and 2 negatives. When I combine them, I would end up with 0 because this positive cancels that negative, this positive cancels that negative. So we end up with a 0 pair. And this is what you guys should have used last year when you were modeling using integers. But this year we're going to get more into the operations. We're going to start off with adding integers. How do you add integers if they have the same sign? For example, if you have two numbers that are both positive, let's say 5 and 2. Both of these are positive numbers, so I will just add them 7, and my 7 would also be positive. It works the same way if I have two negative numbers. So let's say I have a -3 plus a -6. Since these two integers have the same sign, then my answer will also have the same sign, and I can just add them up. 3 plus 6 is 9. So remember, if your integers have the same sign, then you just add up your numbers and you keep the sign. It works slightly different, however, if your integers have different signs. When the signs are different, you are going to subtract. So let's say we have a -5 plus a +2. I'm going to subtract. 5 minus 2 is 3. Now, how do I know what sign to use? You always want to use the sign from the larger number. Since 5 is larger than 2 and 5 happens to be negative, then my answer will be negative. Let's look at another example. 7 plus a -3. Notice here that I have a +7 and a -3, so I'm adding two integers that have different signs. That means that I'm going to subtract. 7 minus 3 gives me 4. Now, how do I know if 4 is going to be positive or negative? Well, I look at my problem and I see that 7 is larger than 3 and 7 is positive, so I know my answer is going to be positive. So we can start with an example of subtracting. Let's say I have 5 minus -3. What does that equal? Well, I'm going to start with my LCO. First of all, I'm going to leave 5. I'm going to change this subtraction to an addition problem. Lastly, I'm going to find the opposite of -3, which is a +3. Now I can go back to my rules for adding, and since both of these are positive numbers, I can add them together. 5 plus 3 is 8. The answer would be a +8. Let's do another example. Let's say I have -3 minus 4. Okay, I see that I have a subtraction problem, so I'm going to have to do my LCO. leave the -3, change the subtraction to an addition, and then opposite of +4 is a -4. Once again here, I will use my rules for addition, and since both of these happen to be negative integers, I will add them. 3 plus 4 is 7, and since they have the same sign, I'm going to keep that sign, which will be a -7. Next, I want to talk to you about multiplying and dividing integers. Now, I have a quick little trick that I use anytime I'm multiplying or dividing integers. I'm going to draw a triangle. I'll put a plus sign at the top, two subtraction symbols or negative signs, whatever you want to call them, on the bottom. Anytime I am multiplying or dividing integers, let's say I have -5 times a +2. I'm going to cover up in the triangle the integers or the types of integers that I have. So here I have a -5, so I've used that negative. Here I have a +2, so I've used that positive. What am I left with in my triangle? I'm left with a negative. So I know that my answer is going to be negative. And 5 times 2 is 10. So I know my answer is going to be -10. All right, let's do another example to show the multiplying and dividing rules for integers. Let's say I have a -3 times a -7. Once again, I'm going to draw my little triangle here. Plus sign at the top, two subtraction symbols at the bottom. All right, so here I have -3 times -7. Well, what have I used? I've used one negative for -3. I've used another negative for -7. So all I'm left with is the positive. So that means my answer is going to be positive. 3 times 7 is 21, and that would be a +21. It works the same with dividing. So let's do an example with division. Let's say I have a +25 divided by a -5. I'm going to draw my triangle once again just so I can remember. I see here that I have a +25, so I've used my positive. And then I also see that I have a -5. That means I've used my negative. 25 divided by 5 is going to be 5. And the only sign that I'm left with is a negative. And one last example. Let's say we have 100, a -100 divided by a -25. Once again, I'll draw my triangle, positive at the top, two negatives at the bottom. I see that my 100 is a negative, I've used 1. I see that my 25 is also a negative, so I've used 2. 100 divided by 25 gives me 4. I'm only left with a plus sign, so that means that my answer must be a +4.